Hello, my name is Father Tighe, and this is our 27th segment of our journey of faith in the light of the cross, and I welcome you again. I'm very happy that you continue to journey with us. If we look on the screen now, we'll see the theme of the 27th segment. If Gentiles share fully in the inheritance, did God deceive Israel, whom he called his firstborn? Remember, God told Moses, go tell Pharaoh, Israel is my firstborn. And the Israelites, the Jews, were always faithfully and zealously observing the commandments in order to claim their inheritance. Now, if we read this without realizing this was the problem, you wouldn't make much sense out of it. But let's go to the next screen and look at this now. Galatians chapter 4. This is right after they claimed their inheritance, Jew and Greek, slave and free, male and female. I mean, as long as an heir is not of age, he is no different than a slave. We all know that, and this is what it means to be under the pedagogue. He is the owner of everything, so the Israelites were owners of God's inheritance, but he is under guardians and supervisors till the date set by the Father. We also, when children, were enslaved to the basic elements of the world. Now, we go to our next screen and it says, but in the fullness of time, God sent forth his Son. This is the problem. Jesus is God's firstborn son. Did God deceive Israel? He was born of a woman born under the law. So he is born of a Jewish mother. Therefore, he has the blood of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he is born under the law, to redeem those under the law. So he comes to redeem. Now, the other places they use the word rescue or ransom. That is very different from redeem. Remember, we've been emphasizing that all through. Redeem means to give something full value that seems to have no value, to transform a curse in our lives into a blessing. So the law was like a heavy burden, a curse that held them down. Jesus comes to redeem the law. He doesn't come to throw it away. He comes to redeem it and give it its full value. So we might be adopted as sons. So Paul says, I am also a Jew, and we can be the adopted sons of God. As proof that you are sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying out, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a son, and if a son, then an heir through God. Now, that is very interesting. Since the beginning of Galatians, Paul has been explaining how the covenant with Abraham, the covenant of promise, was the eternal covenant, and the law, the Mosaic law, was a necessary historical necessity, a natural law. Okay? Now, and then he was explaining why faith is more important than zealous observance of the law. Human effort can't achieve what we get when we surrender in faith to God. And then Paul explained the full meaning of the law, the pedagogue. All right, now, all of a sudden, he comes back to the tree of life. Remember, I've been emphasizing, the tree of life is when you intuitively see something and you commit your whole life. A man falls in love with a woman. He says, this is the one I am to journey through life with. And you go, are you sure? And he has to check it out. And that's the tree of knowledge. I go back and check my knowledge, check my history, her history. That's what an engagement means. But the same thing happens with the cross. People looked at the cross, the disciples and the apostles, when Jesus was crucified, but all the people who heard Jesus evangelize, they heard Jesus portrayed as crucified on the cross, and something happened. Instead of their lives falling apart, instead of being conscious of all the brokenness in their lives and things that don't fit together, all of a sudden they felt God pulling them together. And they felt their lives coming together. And their weaknesses and faults were redeemed into blessings. And they're going, what is this? I know this is the way I shall find my redemption. This is how I shall find my fulfillment. And now we saw, later on, they started asking Paul, but how does this make sense? The tree of knowledge. And Paul's explaining the tree of knowledge. But right now he comes back and he says, do you recall what happened when the crucifixion was portrayed to you? You felt something special and you cried out, Abba, Father. Now, when an adopted child is said, you're adopted and you're going to receive the inheritance, there's always an insecurity. Until the day the father comes and said, here's the bank book, here's the bonds, the stocks, here's the keys to the car, here's the keys to the house, and the adopted child receives the fulfillment of its inheritance, and it goes, oh, Daddy. I'm sorry if it's a little crude, but Abba means that. My Father, you gave it all to me, the inheritance I've been waiting for. All the insecurity falls away, and you feel very rich. But what happened to the disciples was even more than that. We go on to our next screen, and we see God sent forth the firstborn to redeem those under the law to be adopted sons. Now what happened? The Jews claim and feel and reveal their inheritance by giving it away. What does that mean? Jesus, the real firstborn, he came and he gave everything to his adopted firstborn, to Israel. Jesus held back nothing. When did they see that he was God? When he was totally empty on the cross. He had given everything away. So the real firstborn son gave the adopted firstborn son everything. Nothing was held back, so God didn't deceive or cheat Israel. What's the problem? When you have a natural inheritance, it's measurable. You get money, and the 5 people divide 100,000, they get 20,000 apiece. But if there's only 2, there's 50. And all of a sudden, the Jewish mind is going back, how can we get the Gentiles get a full share and we don't get more? We should get more. For 2,000 years, we followed God. And Paul is telling them, don't you realize you experience this inheritance, this unique eternal experience, by giving it away the way Jesus did. And just as Jesus gave it away to us, and when he did, he revealed godliness in him, you give it away. And when you give it away, you feel rich. You feel like a son of God, and you reveal the image of God in you. And you feel rich. You feel powerful. You feel wonderful until somebody puts a doubt or a fear in your head. Was I cheated? Was I deceived? And you start thinking about natural inheritance, and it pulls you back, and it limits you, and it makes you feel small. Now we go over here. Jesus revealed his divinity by pouring himself out. God's light radiated from the cross. The last moment, Jesus had poured everything out. So the firstborn gave all to Israel, who claims, feels, and reveals the divine insofar as they share their inheritance with Gentiles. So this is the eternal inheritance that comes from God. It's totally different from a natural inheritance. Paul goes back to the tree of life. You felt so loved you cried out, Abba, Father. As the cross was portrayed to you, you no longer felt like a loser with life falling apart. As the apostles at the cross, you felt God putting your broken pieces together to make you more loving and life-giving. You just think, why? Is God in my life, or am I dreaming? Am I feeling these things? How do they work out with reality? You felt God radiating his love through you and out of you to reveal his glory. He says, don't forget that. Don't throw it away and go back to the elements of this world. We go back to our last screen. And we see here, when you did not know God, you were slaves to elements, not gods. Now that you know God, and he stops and he says, or rather are known by God. John's letter says, you love God. And he said, no, wait a minute. God loved you first. When you let God know you, and you surrender to God, and you allow his love to transform you and make you into a life giver, you're a different person. You're not trying to control God. You're allowing God to fill you with something that you want to give away. You feel rich and talented. Do you want to be slaves again, going back to the old thinking, the elements of this world? You observe days, months, seasons, and years. You have all these little things, rituals you have to do to make you feel some order in your life. I fear I have labored for you in vain. This is the end of this teaching. But next week we continue much more with Paul's personal life and how this all comes together. Now you see, we're talking about Paul as a teacher, but as a teacher he comes back and he says the main evangelization was when you felt God in your life, and you felt him most powerfully when the crucifix was portrayed to you. Don't forget that. Thank you for journeying with us. Continue in segment 28 when we go into Paul's life and how his life was transformed by the portrayal of the crucifix.